Here's an amazing story for you folks. A life-saving surgery ended up being a life-altering experience. He was just shy of 4 years old when he went in for emergency surgery. He slipped out of consciousness, and that's when he says he entered into heaven. He met people he never knew, like his grandfather and St. John the Baptist. Colton Burpo and his father, Todd, that is, highlight this remarkable experience in the new book, Heaven is for Real. And they both join me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Gretchen.
Good morning.
What an amazing story. Todd, let me start with you. You're facing a crisis. Your son, an emergency surgery. You think you might not be able to save him. He recovers. It's a miracle. But then you hear a story you never thought you'd hear.
Yeah, we went through the scariest ordeal of our lives, watching our son suffer. He was misdiagnosed. He had appendicitis, and they thought he had the stomach flu, and by the time they figured out what was really wrong with him, we figured his appendix had probably been burst for about 5 days. And he was one really just sick, really very sick child. And when we finally got out of the hospital, all of a sudden, it took a long time, but he started sharing stories and things with us, and all of a sudden we realized something special happened while Colton was in the hospital.
Right, because Colton, you were able at that age, 4, to tell your parents that you were above them while you were being operated on, and where did you see them?
Well, I saw my dad in a little room talking to God, and then I saw my mom in another room talking on the phone and talking to one of her friends.
And Todd, there was no way he would have known about that, right?
No, while those events were happening, he was in surgery under anesthesia, and when he starts describing where we were at and what we were doing, I was stunned. I was like, how does he know that? That's where our story began.
And then he also started to tell you about Pop, who was your grandfather. Was your grandfather his grandfather? Anyway, he had been deceased for 30 years?
Yeah, it was my grandfather, Colton's great-grandfather, and I was really close to him as a child. And Pop was a special person in my life, but he was killed in a car wreck before I turned 7. He can recognize pictures of Pop as a young man, talks about the time I spent with him as a child. It's incredible.
You also, Colton, say that God is a very, very big person, right?
Yeah, he can actually fit the entire world into his hands.
Wow. So many people want to know what you now know. What about Jesus?
Well, Jesus, he had a rough but kind face, sea blue eyes, and a smile that lit up the heavens.
And what about old people? They are not up in heaven, right?
No, just young adults.
Yeah, the good news, Gretchen, is when you go to heaven, it'll be the young version.
A lot of us, including myself, like to hear that part of it. Todd, real quickly, I want to get what happened about a miscarried child that you and your wife had and what Colton told you.
Yeah, we were in the living room one day, and just like any typical day, and he's 4 at the time, he kind of comes bouncing in the room, and he just goes up to his mom and says, "Mom, I have 2 sisters." And it took us a while to ask him, "What are you talking about?" And he just looks at his mom and says, "Mom, you had a baby die in your tummy, didn't you?" And just time stopped. And she's like, "Who told you that?" And Colton's like, "Well, she did. She told me she died in your tummy."
Amazing.
And it just, wow, yeah.
Amazing story. If you will stick around for us, we'll be right back in just 2 minutes with more amazing stories.
I knew there was going to be a mass exit out of this building after the services today to the bookstore, because I think a lot of you are going to want to pick up this book and read it. Again, this little child is 11 now, recounting what had happened to him at 4 years old. And the amazing thing, by the way, what that issue about the miscarried child, what does that say about abortion? That every life is precious. What does it say about, that these lives, even a miscarriage, that doesn't stay just a small little embryo, but a grown little girl that embraces this child? What does it say about the glory of heaven? Some of you that have lost, not lost, but have loved ones die and go to heaven, knowing that they're waiting. In fact, one of the things they didn't say here was the little girl, the miscarried child, that is now a little girl in glory, that hugged Colton, told through Colton, said to his mother, "Mom, she can't wait to see you and Dad, waiting to hug you and embrace you." Powerful, powerful words. Now, a lot of people can dismiss this and say, "Oh, the Randy of a little boy," or "the dad made it up." You can believe whatever you want to believe. But friend, let me tell you something. One of the amazing things that came out of the story, and I'll say this to you and then move on from that point, But Colton had seen Christ's face. And when the parents, asked him to describe it, he did like he did right there, rough face, kind of sea blue eyes, so forth and so on. They would show him pictures over a period of months. Colton, is this, what Jesus looks like? I mean, hundreds of pictures of artist renderings of what Christ looked like. And every time he'd see a picture, he'd say, no, that's not it. That's not it. Clothes aren't right. That's not it. And just dismissed it. Months went by, and Todd Burpo, the pastor, the father who was a pastor, got a call from a friend of his who had heard an interview of a Lithuanian American girl, I think from Iowa, who was now in her teens at that time, and it was a beautiful artist and had an experience when she was 4 years old, this Lithuanian girl, who had also went to heaven. Her parents were atheists, not even wanted the name of God mentioned in her home, unlike Todd's dad, who's a pastor. And this little girl came back, and because of her artistic gift, in the years that followed, began painting pictures of what she saw in heaven, including the face of Jesus. And it was online where you could access it. You can see this picture. The picture's in the book. So Todd's father, he was told, he says, you want to take this picture and bring it to your son. So the dad got a hold of the photo, and without saying where he got the picture, just like all the other pictures he had brought in front of his son, and said, son, what's wrong with this picture of Jesus? The son took the photo, stared at it for a few seconds, looked up to his father, not knowing it was painted by another little girl at 4 years of age, the same age, who said she had went to heaven and came back. Todd looked at his dad and said, Dad, that's it. That's it. If you look at the photo, it's in the book and it's online, you can see it. It's a Mideastern face. It's not the Caucasian American blonde hair, blue eye Jesus that we put in our movies, in Hollywood. It's a very Mideastern kind of Arabic looking figure with coarse hair, but enchanting, powerful, deep eyes. Very interesting. Say whatever you want to say, but man, I'll tell you this, my wife and I have been blessed by that. It really encouraged us. Now, please understand, I know that the majority of us will most likely never have an experience like that. But let me ask you a question. If it was you, forget it. If it was your child, okay, every mom and dad in here, how about if it was your son that happened to? And you knew for a fact, okay, like Todd said, if indeed this man's telling the truth, okay? I have no doubt, in my mind at least, that he isn't. Because if you read the book, you'll see the sequence of the way it happened. He reluctantly wrote that book, years later, only by the urging of pastors, other pastors, ministers, and friends that have been blessed, especially those experiencing miscarriages and abortion, the encouragement that gave to many, many women out there. He only under much encouragement, over years did the father put it in print and put it out there. He was afraid about the media, the attention that would draw. And indeed, believe me, there was not one other liberal media outlet that ran the story, except Fox News. Thank God for one media outlet that will run stories like that. I'm not in agreement with everything on Fox News, but believe me, at least they'll give the Christian perspective. But the rest of it was just a flood of criticism. But what if that was your child, and you knew for a fact that when he told you where you were at while he was lying on a surgery table and what you were doing specifically, that's what got the parents' attention, and then began to tell you things about your miscarried child, if that were the case. How would that shape your faith? What would that do? Would that shake you up? Would you come back after an experience like that, or your child's experience, and then suddenly reorder your life? Would that would that be enough to awaken us out of our spiritual slumber and begin to embolden us then to witness? What would it take to get us to really begin to live our lives as true disciples of Christ, and not half-heartedly, almost like I want to keep one foot in the world, I still want to live my life just in case there is no heaven. I want to get it right here and yet one foot in the church because I'm afraid if I die and there is a heaven, I'm going to go to hell. I mean, come on, What would it take to get the average believer, church-going person, to jump in with both feet? Would it take an experience of seeing Jesus? Or going to heaven like little Colton Burpo, and experiencing these things? What would it take? I want to show you one more passage, okay? This time, turn, if you would please, if you have your Bibles, turn with me to the Gospel of John. In the closing chapters, in chapter 20, beginning in verse 24, let me tell you about a story about a man by the name of Thomas who just happened to be one of the apostles, okay? Now understand, we're talking about seeing Jesus, right? Well, if I were one of the 12 apostles and I saw the resurrected Christ, then I would be willing to give my life for him. Well, would you? Would you? Mind you, these men walked with Jesus for 3 years. Understand, they saw him open up the eyes of the blind, make the lame walk. My goodness, friend, they saw him walk on water. You know, that's a pretty neat trick, you know. They saw him walk on water. Then they saw him in his resurrection body. You know, that first part of that in verse 19, we won't read all that, but it's about Jesus appearing to the disciples in the room. In his resurrected body, said, look at the marks on my hands. See the, where the spear went on my side. And then they all walked down, got down their knees and worshiped him. Well then, verse 24, now Thomas, remember the doubting Thomas? One of the 12, not with the disciples when Jesus came in. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. You could almost hear, the excitement in their voice. Thomas, we've seen the Lord. Man, he's been here. We saw the Lord. But Thomas, indignant, just in the expression here, he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my finger where those nails were, put my hand in his side, I will not believe it. Then a week later, his disciples were in the house again. Now this is a week later. And Thomas was with them this time. Through the door, though the doors were locked, Jesus came in, stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he looked right at Thomas, said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said to him then, oh, my Lord and my God. And Jesus told him, because you've seen me, you have believed. Say this line with me, folks. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Say that again. Blessed are those who have not yet seen and yet believe. Do you hear what Christ was saying to us? Even if we had been present for the miracles, like the disciples when the Romans grabbed him in confusion, would we have ran and locked the doors like they did? Probably so. Probably so.